Silksong opens up with 7 envoys carrying Hornet in a cage through the wastelands, arriving at Pharloom and crossing the bridge, before falling down. This introductory cutscene was first shown in the reveal trailer during the ancient times of 2019, and it remains the exact same as that day. While everything about it seems normal at first, there are 2 very important problems it actually has. The first one has to do with the Great Chasm in the background. You may be able to notice that the light coming from the top has a slight blue hue. This doesn't really make any sense, as what is above this chasm is actually the blasted steps, a windy, dark and sand-swept area devoid of any light. However, during the time this cutscene was made, the area above was actually the coral steps, the old version of Blasted that featured the watery environment with blue hues and lush coral everywhere, having been cut from the game after 2021. That is why the blue hue is shown during this cutscene, and it is the first of many inconsistencies that make the world of Pharloom kind of broken. My goal with this video is not to trash on Team Cherry and the world of Silksong. In fact, I think Pharloom is the best world I've ever experienced in a video game, but instead to bring attention to some small and some not so small issues it actually has. Nothing can be perfect, and I hope some of you get to see just how interesting and interconnected the world actually was before a lot of the content got cut. There are many inconsistencies far larger than this first one, and they probably require some basic knowledge of cut content to be understood with accuracy. I will offer some context on that, but do consider reading the wiki, it is amazing. That brings us to the second problem of this cutscene, and that is the very basic question of where are the envoys actually taking Hornet? This to some of you may be a very obvious answer. The Citadel, right? Well, yeah, but like, how? If we take a look at what is to the right of the chasm bridge, it ends up leading the envoys through the large hallway with the Shellwood Bell Shrine, before ending in a big drop to the bottom of the area. So the envoys are practically unable to bring Hornet by taking this path. It is impossible. This would be the most major plot hole in the entire game if not for one potential saving grace that defends it: the concept of the Z-axis. You see, while the gameplay world of Hollow Knight is in 2D, the canonical world is actually 3D, due to the hidden Z-axis that is used to create cool parallax effects. The best example here would be this amazing river of lava outside of the seamstress. It shows that the world stretches far beyond anything we can reach gameplay wise, and also makes me wish I could just go in that direction, come on. What this means for the case of the envoys is that they could perhaps take a different direction from this hallway and not end up in a pit of doom. But that feels a bit weird, no? They still have to pass through the dangers of Shellwood and climb through the blasted steps to reach the Grand Gate. And I don't really see how they would be able to carry Hornet's cage through that area. Not to mention, even trek its dangers without dying. And it looks like Team Cherry was thinking the same thing, and it is where cut content comes into play. All the way up to 2022, there existed this lift shaft that began where the Bell Shrine is today, stretched through the coral steps and terminated in front of the Grand Gate. This shaft was big enough to hold Hornet's cage, and it was the perfect way to bring her to the Citadel directly. The evidence for this being the case goes back even further, with this lift being conceptualized back in goddamn 2017. I wasn't even born yet. When the steps went through the rework, Team Cherry even tried their best to keep this lift in the game, but unfortunately, due to the geometry of the area not fitting its placement, it was removed. This termination point where this card is placed is a leftover from that cut, and it just kind of sits there without any purpose. This was the real reason why the envoys were seemingly taking Hornet to Shellwood. They were planning to take this lift and end up directly in front of the Citadel itself. And due to the removal of the lift shaft, this path doesn't make sense anymore. It is kind of a shame and even confusing why Team Cherry couldn't make it work by the end, due to how important it was to the game. I mean, it is literally the first thing the player sees. Thankfully, the cage breaks and the envoys do end up falling through the chasm, so this elevator not existing doesn't really matter much in the end. This supposed plot hole is honestly quite well hidden, and I want to hear more opinions on why the envoys could be taking this path without taking the lift into consideration. So please spark some discussion about that if you want to. Also, consider checking out my Patreon to help with production on more of these videos. Thank you. After the opening, Hornet ends up falling into the Moss Grotto, and that is where the second major issue with the world is revealed. Why does the Moss Grotto even exist? For moss to grow, there needs to be water sustaining the land and making it suitable. And like, there is water, but most of it is just tiny streams and waterfalls. And worst of all, where is all of that water coming from? Not once in the game do we see a massive body of water that could be dripping down slowly and making Moss Grotto flourish in such a desolate and fiery environment that is right next to it. This is actually another case where cut content is relevant to the topic at hand. God, this is becoming a trend. Moss Grotto used to be under the Aspid, the old version of Verdania featuring some acidic elements, and that area used to be under the Red Coral Gorge, a massive area with subregions like the Coral Steppes. There are technically two possibilities here. One of them is that the water would seemingly drip down from the gorge, falling down into the Aspid while being filtered before ending up in the grotto, creating the green waters and sustaining the area. The other is that the water would directly drip down into the grotto from the Great Chasm, doing pretty much the same thing. In the Edge magazine, Team Cherry mentioned how the Moss Grotto exists due to the area being outside of the Citadel's sphere of influence. And sure, that does explain how the grotto may have been created, but it doesn't explain why it still exists, as again, there is currently no body of water sustaining it from above. The Blasted Steppes and the Wormways are possibly the most desolate and dry areas in the game. The grotto did not exist in 2017, the first year of the development maps, as it was known purely as the Bone Church, being right beside Bone Bottom and having no moss at all. The inclusion of moss was done around the time when the gorge got created as well, and while the gorge got cut, the Moss Grotto remains. And I kind of have a theory as to why. Put on your clown makeup, guys, because it's speculation time. The grotto is a single area in the reveal trailer that was completely shown off during the 2019 demo, during the time the gorge was still a big thing. And Team Cherry likely knew that changing the whole tutorial area wouldn't really be a smart thing to do when it was already completely shown. Of course, that's just a dumb theory, but the existence of this area is kind of puzzling me to the point where I've had to mention it. Some of you may remember the Moss Druid, an NPC who is, let's just say, a little bit crazy, but seems to be in the process of cooking up an old heart by Act 3. Old hearts are able to sustain areas in Pharloom, as seen with the far fields due to Carmelita's wild heart. This would honestly be the perfect solution as to how the grotto is even sustaining itself, but unfortunately this heart is in the process of being made. It doesn't exist yet canonically, so it cannot be used as the reason for the existence of this area. One last thing about the Moss Grotto is that its waters are also green, yuck, and have these tiny white bugs that fly around. These are actually mini versions of Pendras, and also exist in Verdanian waters. But why is this? The grotto and Verdania are on two completely opposite sides of the world. Did the Pendras somehow teleport here? Of course not. These are actually leftovers from the Aspid area. During 2021, the area featured the exact same enemies as Verdania, with some of its rooms flipped, with even moss spanning throughout the region. Although these tiny Pendras flying around the grotto are, I think, a bit more justified than the area itself, because the Hunter's Journal never mentions that they're native Verdanian species, despite them being a clear leftover. So, +1 Team Cherry. While Aspid was cut after 2021 and evolved into Verdania on the other side of the map, some leftovers like these leaves and rocks in the Craggler room still exist. And in the Great Chasm, we can find this pilgrim statue that has clovers on it. This statue has always pissed off the shit out of me. Like, how could Team Cherry miss it? By the way, this starting room where the cage falls down has disabled envoys placed in a scene. There are 4 of them here. If we take these into consideration and remove the bone bottom ones due to the sprites being the same, we get 7 dead envoys throughout Lower Pharloom, while in the actual game, there are only 6 corpses found. Team Cherry forgot to place one of these corpses. Unplayable. Speaking of Verdania, the area is canonically located right beside Greymoor, but its leftover is still there. Clovers are even growing out of the corpse of the Green Prince. Rest in peace, GOAT. From the cut content of the upcoming Sea of Sorrow DLC, we know that the sea itself will be located right beside Bilewater, spanning potentially a pretty big chunk of the space in the world map. This would technically put it right above Verdania vertically. And you know, it is kind of strange that Verdania would be able to sustain itself with actual salt water dropping down and creating it in the first place, especially with how lush and floral the area is. Don't get me wrong here, this is a very minor case of a potential problem, and I can see how easy it would be for the water to get filtered out on the way down to the area. And with the sea not existing yet, Team Cherry could go in pretty much any direction to make this work. But this point leads into my next point nicely, so I've decided to include it. And it's my fucking video, I'll do what I want. Greymoor is this massive, misty area that has slaves toiling by catching silk. As the player explores it, they may notice these strange barnacles on a lot of the walls and foreground, which makes me think, why are they here? For barnacles to appear in general, there needs to be a big water source spanning the entire region, pretty much flooding it. And while Greymoor does indeed have some water, and even the Crow Lake, none of these sources are deep enough to be the cause of these barnacles. With the help of some interesting environmental storytelling, at some point in time, Greymoor was actually flooding periodically. This can be seen in these dams constructed using bamboo and sandbags, likely built by bugs in the past to try to block these floods. But where would these floods even be coming from? Well, it turns out they would be coming from the Sea of Sorrow, because Greymoor used to be right next to the cut Pharloom Bay area, a small docking town right next to the sea, where Hornet would seemingly obtain a submersible. This tiny area also featured barnacles, albeit giant ones, and their size makes a lot more sense since they are right next to the sea in the first place. It's very likely that the sea would flood in the past, with the flood spanning across the grounds of Greymoor as well, creating barnacles for these two regions. This is some goddamn genius environmental storytelling, and it's why it's such a shame it had to be changed. Due to the current placement of the Sea of Sorrow, there is just no way to connect it back to Greymoor in any meaningful way, with Verdania having no source of water that could flood Greymoor. These barnacles remain an anomaly, even if there used to be a really strong explanation earlier in the game's development. I'm a bit bummed out that the sea had to be moved to the right of Bilewater, but it is what it is. Maybe we will get something similar later down the road that will blow our minds. There's another strange thing about Greymoor, and it's the entrance to Bellheart. This bell house wall is the only bell wall in the entire game that has light coming out of the houses. This doesn't happen at all on the Shelwood side, and most importantly, does not happen in Bellheart itself. This is already kind of strange because there is a pretty large hallway between Bellheart and these lights. But there is also, guess what, some cut content, or at least planned content involved here. In 2017, Team Cherry was planning to add a 2-room bell house on the right wall that would connect to this Greymoor wall. So I guess that would have made more sense with these lights being here. Of course, as far as we know, nobody lives in these houses, so them being lit up is questionable at best, unless there is some secret cult stuff going on in there. Spooky. Lastly, Greymoor has this one inconsistency that really triggers me, so I just had to include it. In this room, we can see gilded platforms despite there being no reason for their existence. It turns out these platforms are leftovers from when this room used to host a bellway, and Team Cherry probably forgot to change them into regular bamboo platforms. I think this is hilarious considering how much the developers seem to care about platforming making sense within the game world, with all of them having pretty clear foundations and reasoning behind their existence. This is what makes this room the worst room in the entire game. So you all know the Fort Chorus, right? That one insanely dope boss that is the biggest pushover in the game. My question is, why is it called the Fort Chorus? Who were the first 3? Is there more than 4? In the underworks at the architect workshop, we can see 3 chorus hangars that show they are created in these. But that last hangar for the fort is kind of just like missing. It turns out that in the 2021 map, this place actually had 4 hangars, possibly because the architect workshop at the time was not visible here. This gives a place for all the known choruses and makes the Fort Chorus name work, as it was deployed to Farfields. I have no clue why this was changed. It's not like the room doesn't work with this additional hangar, and giving more lore to the actual choruses would have been nice. But then again, the architect had to have some sort of place, and I have no clue what to think about this whole fiasco. If we take a trip to the Farfields, a grassy area with a lot of magma, its Act 3 extension has a major structural inconsistency that likely resulted with Team Cherry constantly reworking Carmelita's opera. The opera itself is made out of hard bones, spanning quite a lot of the land on the z-axis. The first hallway is completely normal. It's the inside of a collapsing fortress after all, but once we drop down in this hole, we are led to a grassy and open environment, despite the fortress clearly still extending down to our position just behind us. A similar problem happens on the path to this top bench, but I think the destruction of the area is better communicated here and it makes some sense. This hole though, man, it completely breaks the geometry of the entire structure, and fuck man, TC was able to hide it really well. Alright, let's knock out some honorable mentions before moving on to the final one. First of all, this Citadel room. It used to open up and lead to the Memoriam Bridge years ago, but now it's just a cave-in. This was changed after the Memoriam was gated behind Fade Down, but not having this connection just makes this part of the Citadel make no sense. Like, why even make it if it doesn't lead anywhere? What were the Citadel bugs thinking? This one dumb ledge in the Coral Tower room. It used to lead to Vault Nest, now it just exists here and makes people spam 1,000 YouTube shorts about it. Also the Silk in the first shrine. This is a leftover from when the Bell Shrines used to be more significant, and this one being strung up today is strange. So I am recording this as I'm finishing the video, and it may sound different, but don't mind that. I just woke up and feel brain dead, but who cares about that honestly. This is something I forgot to mention, but I don't really see how it is possible for the Weavers to get down into the abyss to do their research, and even worse, get back up. The official way to get down to the abyss is by using the diving bells, but these bells are clearly meant to be purely used by the dock workers, bugs who can withstand high temperatures and penetrate the lava. The Weavers cannot really fit into these bells, and I also don't see why they wouldn't have their own version of the bells they themselves constructed in the Weave Nests, rather than using a service constructed by those in the docks. And if let's say the Weavers do end up somehow getting down there, how are they getting out? Hornet has to do a whole ass gauntlet of platforming with rising lava just to reach the docks. Were the Weavers supposed to endure the same thing? I mean, obviously not. This path gets completely blocked by lava when Hornet gets up anyways. This inconsistency is kind of similar to how the vessels escaped the abyss in the first game, and I find that pretty funny. Even Team Cherry doesn't know the answer to that question. It's possible this abyss problem wasn't thought of very much because the abyss was one of the last areas ever made for the game. Anyways, back to my inferior past self. The chapels closing after you complete them isn't really explained or even implied to have any reason for them doing so lore-wise. I get that Team Cherry wanted to spawn you outside of the chapel, but we don't know why they close at all. I guess it's just Hornet's aura. This is not really related to the world itself, but I think mentioning it is still relevant to the topic at hand. For some reason, none of the bosses tend to explode into shell shards upon being defeated, despite the lore clearly implying that they should. Some of the best examples here are the Moss Mother and Savage Beastfly, two bosses that have offspring which do indeed explode into shell shards. This is more so a general gameplay decision made by the developers, but I'm not entirely sure what the lore implication of this should be, or if there is any in the first place, which I doubt there is. It just feels a bit wrong to not have them explode into shell shards with how much attention to detail everything else has. At the end of the day, it's whatever, man. And finally, we have arrived at the ending. Let us talk about it and Grandmother Silk herself. It is never really explained why Grandmommy wants to capture Hornet in the first place. It is sort of implied the reason behind her capture is for Silk, at least in the conversation with the seamstress. But the issue with this is that we never see what that silk could be used for in the first place. We don't know why GMS needs Hornet Silk. Hell, we have no clue why she needs Silk in general. It's not like anything changes at the end, as Hornet can just beat her ass and become the Weaver Queen herself. This is for one last time where cut content comes into play. In older versions of the game, there was an ending called Strung to Serve. This is the ending you would get if you rushed to GMS and fought her without doing any of the side content. The consequence of doing this was Grandmother Silk hugging Hornet tightly and straight up quote-unquote absorbing her, becoming an even stronger pale being than before. This is honestly a really good reason as to why GMS would want Hornet. Her pale lineage would allow her to reach newer heights of power. Obviously, this ending was cut due to the game evolving, and the actual reason for the capture remains pretty unclear to this day. So far, this video has ended up being kind of more negative than I actually anticipated, and that is a bit scary. I've been talking about this game for a long time, and most of that time was spent positively, complimenting its design choices and the world itself. And I want to keep doing that. In fact, I want to see a few things right now that I think are better decisions compared to their older counterparts. I really like Bilewater. I think the area is great, and even Sinner's Road has its own unique style and flavor. Dustroach Pens and the Gloom never really seemed that interesting, and I think what we got is honestly more unique. Hell, there are even these little details like the muck roaches that are often very overlooked. These guys were originally just called dust roaches, but with the addition of muck, we get to see their entire life and reproduction cycle, and their stages of growth. This one might be controversial, but I think the Sands of Karak and Blasted Steppes have a far better story than the one that Coral Gorge may have been able to tell. The sense of finality of Blasted is insane, and I remember just stumbling into these areas and thinking where the gorge was, before realizing it dried up and didn't exist anymore. It created this awesome conclusion in my head where the game taking so long to come out, and with how I've grown as a person during those years of waiting, caused the gorge to dry up and die. Lastly, the way the pilgrims are forced into the underworks before being locked there forever, toiling their lives away, is so much better than when they were allowed to somehow get out to work on fixing Pharloom. Genuinely a genius decision to change this. A lot of people tend to complain about how Silksong is more linear than Hollow Knight, and I get where that is coming from. The older versions of the game definitely had more branching paths and shortcuts around areas, but I don't personally see the lack of these as a bad thing. The way Silksong opens up in Act 2 is something I find most enticing. And that is pretty much it for this topic. I want to quickly thank Mola and Tom Nook for discussing this extensively with me in the past and helping pave the way for the video in general. This video to me felt more like a bonus to the amount of cut content videos I made, mainly consisting of observations that I couldn't fit into those videos, and I think it came out kinda nicely. This game is incredible, and honestly I cannot wait to make another video when Sea of Sorrow comes out, which should be soon, right guys? Anyways, check out my Patreon to support these videos while joining an exclusive Discord server, and as always, take care of yourselves and have a good night.